So anyway, Byron Rogers, and born and raised in Howell, Michigan, and was resident here until I won't tell what year I was born. Anyway, from 1940 to 60, and again from 96 to the present. So I lived here in school all my life except for that period. And no, my mother was born in New Hudson, and my father was born in Marion, up north off 66, I think it is, but moved here as a young man in the mid-teens. And of course, they met here in Howell and lived here most of their lives, almost all their life, in fact. So we've been around for quite a while.
So
I was probably about 5 or 6. Usually that's about the age people start to remember significant things. And I guess I remember decorating my bicycle with crepe paper, weaving it in and around the spokes, and so that for the annual, it must have been 4th of July parade, or Memorial Day, or both. I can't remember, but anyway, that was a big event, and ride it in the parade in front of all those people. and starting school at where the post office is now, and I went to all except the 3rd grade at the same building, which later became known as MAMS, Michigan Avenue Middle School. I don't know if you remember that term or not. And so we started on the south side on the main basement floor, and then the seniors had classes on the 3rd floor on the north side. I'm not quite sure how that all worked, but yeah. I would have gone to, we lived on the I lived in Byron Road until I was 12, and then moved out off of Brighton Road, south of town. We lived just on the south side of Pardee Lake. And so I would have gone to the Stone Country School at Richardson and Coon Lake Road. Because of the consolidation, I had 1 year that I would have gone there before they sent all the kids into town. So that was like the 7th grade. My parents paid tuition so I could come into the big school or continue at the big school, you know, in South Michigan. So that would have been in the early to mid 50s. And then eventually, you know, they closed all the country schools. It took several years, but you know, it was in the mid 50s, I guess, when the big influx really started. So between coming in from the country schools and the Catholic kids coming here after they finished, I think maybe the 7th or 8th grade in the Catholic school, then we had a lot of new faces, which was fun. 3rd grade, I went to Westward School.
Oh, where was that?
It was on Byron Road, where Baldwin Park is right now. I think it's Spring Street or something that comes in right beside it. And there was an old 3-story brick building there. Been shuttered for years, where it had been a school before, and because of the influx of kids, they had to paint it and clean it up a little bit and reopen it for a short period of time, and which is good. I lived 2 blocks away, so. Well, one of the things I was just telling Joyce earlier, that we used to meet here in the library in a little, I think it was a round room, and right at the back of the old section, probably at the top of the steps, are right in there. And after school, sometimes a few of us would meet down here, and maybe we would study, maybe we would just sit around and chat. So that's you know, and that would have been like junior high, early high school. You know, it was great high school. I really enjoyed it. I probably would have graduated higher in my class had I not been in 4-H and FFA and sports and the band and that kind of thing. But those are great memories from doing those things.
So actually going back, do you have memories of the fairgrounds?
Of what?
Fairgrounds?
Oh, the fairgrounds?
Yeah.
Barely. I knew where they were, and I think it was like Charles Street and what's the one right beside Grundy's? Anyway, back in there. It was just kind of an empty lot when I was a kid, except the circus came to town and they set it up on the old fairgrounds. So that's about the only thing I remember about the fairgrounds. And my dad talked about it, but so that was a big deal when the circus came to town. And pick up basketball games at the neighborhoods, wherever kids had their own hoop, and we all knew where they were. We just put the basketball, if you had your own, in your basket of your bike or under your arm, and just go make the rounds until you found a place to play. So, yeah, I played football. I loved football. And at that time, guys weren't quite so big as they are now. Dick McMacken was the biggest kid in school, and he was about 6'3", and probably, well, they listed him at 230 on the football roster, probably a little bit more than that. But so yeah, I played football, loved it. I was captain of the football team, and was a running back and a linebacker and free safety and whatever.
Whatever they needed.
Yep. Yep, and I loved it. It was great.
Did you have a favorite teacher at school?
Oh, Wilbur Davis, I think, the shop teacher. A lot of people have told me that was their favorite too. Mm-hmm. He taught mostly wood shop, and he was well loved. He had kids in school, and he also had a hobby in building his own radios, which was unheard of back then. I think the Heath made a kit where you could build your own radio. And Merle Weaver was the voc-ag teacher, vocational agriculture teacher, and sponsor of the FFA. And Mr. Willis, who also was a track coach, taught math. And well, there were several of them, but those are the ones I remember. Oh yeah, there was another youth center later, I think after the one where Citizens is, down across from the Catholic Church. I'm trying to think what would be there. Now, about where, the dollar store, the new dollar store, and before that, Cephas grocery store. And right in there was a frame building. I think it was a double schoolroom at one time for the Catholic school. Then he converted that to youth center. So that was where we met and squealed the tires on our car and hung out and played ping pong and whatever. That was fun. I think it was my junior year or sophomore year, maybe. Her sophomore year, my junior year. She moved from Lansing, and but we didn't date until the end of my freshman year in college. And she was very popular, and so I had to take a number, but I ended up with her. Our dad owned a sporting good clothing store across from Massey's Barber Shop, right in where Steve used to have his photography store. And so anyway, we were married 46 years, and then some. She died in 2007 of cancer. And I was fortunate enough to meet my current wife, and probably my last one, I would expect, hopefully, in church, across the street in the Presbyterian Church. And she's a Howell girl, too. She's came here at age 4, and was in a short stint in Kalamazoo. She lived here the rest of her life, and so she knows more people than I do.
So did you know her growing up?
No.
No?
No, actually, she lived out on Bentley Lake Road in Schaefer, out about a mile off of D19, south of town. And I lived on Brighton Road, and we only lived 2 or 3 miles apart. But of course, I haven't told you, we're in almost different generations. She's considerably younger than I am. And other than that, I didn't really know her until I met her in church. Just maybe a year before my first wife died. And they had met one another in church. So. one day I went and sat down beside her and in church and kept doing that, and we ended up getting married. Not right away, but.
You were persistent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a fun time to be alive and to be growing up. Howell was a nice town. Very, as I'm a little more conservative, but very little influence of any drugs. A lot of people smoked. But not a whole lot of crime in Howell that I remember. You know, and it was a great time because the auto industry was booming and just flourishing at that time. My old friend Terry Dunham was part of that. He and I started out Cub Scouts friends together and so on. And he always said, you know, Barney, he said, you know, we ought to write a story about growing up in Howell. And then Joyce told me this morning that Zimp said the same thing. So, not we, but, you know, there should be a story. It was a great time. People were having fun. Economy was good. The cars were becoming a lot more sportier, and when V8s came out in 1955 for Chevy, and in 54 for overhead cam V8s, or overhead valve V8s. So it was a fun time to have a hot rod and cruise the streets. And I had friends that we used to work on our cars together. In fact, over in back of Cobb Hall, that was a gas station. I don't know if you remember that or not. At one time, and there was a work area out in back at McPherson Oil. You worked on their trucks and stuff. And so one night a week, because my dad was a partner in the company, we got to use that area to work on our cars and help one another. So it was a fun time. It was a great place to live.
Now, did you serve?
In the military?
Mm-hmm.
I was in ROTC for 3 years at Central Michigan, and 2 years are mandatory. And third year I went what they call advanced ROTC. And first wife and I were married when I was starting my junior year in college. And in the middle of my senior year, we found out that, as they say nowadays, we were expecting. At the time, she was expecting, but now we are expecting, okay? And then the news was a country no one had ever heard of called Vietnam. And with her expecting and the Vietnam in looming, it was several years away, but it was coming on. And wanting to get on to my teaching career, I was able to exit ROTC. I was a master sergeant, first sergeant actually, when I exited ROTC. And when they were drafting, at that time, they were drafting single guys, and I was married, and then they announced they were drafting married guys with no kids. I had one. And then they were drafting married guys with one kid. I had two. It just worked out that way. It wasn't a master plan. So no, I never served in the active military. I remember the newspapers. I was 13 when Korean War ended, or the Korean conflict. And it's a Korean truce signed in a newspaper. So a lot of the guys my age did go in the military. Some were drafted. And there were 8 or 9 of us guys that hung around together. And all but 2 or 3 of us ended up serving time in the military. And they were in all over the place, mostly Korea and Vietnam.
You got to do your part, right? Well,
I was too young for Korea and not too old for Vietnam, but having a family and kids and so on, why they weren't drafting people.
Yeah.
You know.
Thompson Lake. Did you spend a lot of time at Thompson Lake?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doing what?
Swimming. Just swimming at the public beach. It's where I learned to swim along with a lot of other people. Paul Bennett and his wife Mildred Bennett were swim instructors, and there was a big dock. It was on pilings. It wasn't floating, but there was a distinct drop off out a ways, and you had to be able to swim to get there. And that was a goal of almost every kid coming along to be able to get to the big dock. So Yeah, I spent quite a lot of time down there. I only swam in a pool once until I was well into high school. People just didn't have swimming pools of their own, you know. I was a runner for 25 years, and that's one of my favorite trails, is to run along the lakefront there through the cemetery and the beach. And it's always kind of fun. Yeah. In the first Melon Parade, I drove a team of ponies pulling a little wagon with a McPherson Oil Company sign on the back, 1960, long time ago. So that's, of course, been a big part of Howell ever since. And of course, now in recent years, the Fantasy Lights Parade, which, including the run, which I've done many times. I would still be running, but I had back surgery 4 months ago, and the surgeon says, no, it's not on your bucket list anymore. So,
maybe it's time for a bike.
yeah, oh, I do. I do have bikes. I like the bike, and I ran or jogged over 15,000 miles over the 25-year period. I think Byerly's grocery store is where Schaefer's Music is now. That was run by Kay Voss. It was a friend of my folks, actually. And I used to raise rabbits, my dad and I did. And we would butcher the rabbits and take them down to Kay, and he would sell them over the counter. I couldn't do that nowadays. Anyway, so there, and then Baldwin's drugstore, Livingston's drugstore, Johnson's drugstore, they all half a block apart. And of course, the soda fountains, they all had soda fountains. So that was a popular social place to meet, too.
Was it Spags?
Oh, yeah. Oh, Spags. That was the fourth one. I forgot about that. Yeah. 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 So there were, I worked at a mobile station at the corner of Brighton Road and Grand River. It's an empty lot there now. We talked about that. And when I was in the summer, my first summer, I went away to college and I came back. Of course, where the Opera House is was Sutton's Hardware. That's where I first got my first bicycle there. First time I saw the Opera House, they stored the bikes and other things upstairs on the second floor. And so I had to go up there to pick out a bicycle.
So you saw the Opera House in its raw.
Yeah, well, yeah, saw the, didn't go up in the balcony, but saw, the stage, and I asked, well, what is the stage about here anyway? So actually, when I was in undergrad school at Mount Pleasant, I have a minor in history, and one of the courses I took was Michigan history. And in the text for that, I don't know why I remember this, but it was called Michigan in 4 Centuries. And the author's name was F. Clever Bald. Now, that was so unusual, I remembered it all these days. And it had stories in there about the Howell Opera House in history books. So that was kind of fun, read about that. I went to grad school at Michigan State, so I'm a Spartan. And I have a couple of graduate degrees from Michigan State. I think class reunions are fun. Have you been to any of yours? One?
10 years, that's it.
10 years?
Yeah, that was it.
I was president of my class. I mentioned that before, I think. Or maybe I didn't, whatever. So I've been involved in planning class reunions for almost 60 years now. Next year will be our 60th. Well, at 50th year, we started having one each year. A small one, just more or less for local people. Well, anybody could come, but it's mostly local people. And we have McCleary's had one a couple weeks ago, in fact. And so I think class reunions are fun. Not everybody thinks it's fun. And some people live so far away that, it's too much to make a trip other than maybe like at a 10-year reunion. And a lot of them are held at Cleary's or Schmung Hills or wherever. And I think that's a way of kind of staying in touch. And it's fun. I think it's fun anyway. Fortunately, a couple of my classmates have stepped up at my request and taken over the planning part of them. Other than I still do the little MC kind of stuff, by default, I guess.
Well, you were class president.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I didn't know it was a lifetime appointment. And payphones. And of course that, oh, thank goodness someone invented the cell phone. Oh, my. That made life a lot simpler. I mean, that's not a revelation, of course, but I can remember, you're running late when I call and say you're detained or whatever, and you had to drive through a town and drive around until you could find a phone booth or a payphone on a post, and invariably it would be broken, or it would take your money and not get a call, or a truck would go rumbling by, or maybe all those things, So the phone's definitely, and of course all the electronic and high-tech stuff is just really something, really is. And I have several VHS tapes of family things and whatever, and some VHS-C, the compact one. I don't know if I can even find an adapter to play one of those anymore. You have one? Do you? I had one that was, at one time, looked like a VHS tape, but it had a little door that flipped open and you put the cassette inside of it. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So I still have a couple of VHS players. I have two options for an 8-track player. One I bought at a rummage sale for $5, and I thought it was a gold mine. Because, I don't know if you can even buy anything. Can you buy anything to play an 8-track anymore? A new one? No?
I
Yeah.
think you need something vintage.
Yeah. Well.
So what's 8-track?
What's 8-track? You know what 8-track is, yeah. It's, of course, the traffic is just unreal. I lived, mentioned on Brighton Road, and I could drive into town and not meet a car in 7 miles. Yeah, I was a farm kid. Used to take my horse and sheep to the Fowlerville Fair. My wife, my current wife, teases me about being in FFA. Her brothers were in it, and they both graduated from Howell too, and all three of them. And they were in FFA, and she thought that was really, she's cool. FFA wasn't cool. Was for me. And there were 2 grain mills in town. One's still there where it's south of town, where they sell feed still there, and chemicals and whatever. And the other one was right, it's not going to help for me to point, being on camera, is it? Anyway, down where the Red Caboose is now, right in that area, except right actually on Clinton Street. And I used to bring, corn and wheat in for processing and to get in line. And there was a big one in Pinckney and did the same thing there. Yeah, it was a lot of country influence. We would make the rounds of guys of the car dealerships, and sometimes they would put them inside. We would climb up and look through the window, That was a big deal. Big deal. Big transformation. I remember working in the gas station I mentioned earlier there on National Street with Milford Proving Grounds not being far away. We used to get a sneak peek at some of the models that are like 2 or 3 years out still. And I remember 1960, a 1963 Corvette coming through town. The only year, I think, it had a split window in the back, which they found to be dangerous. So they did away with it, but that was 3 years. I saw it 3 years before it came into production. Well, that was always fun. I worked for the LESA briefly after I retired from the State Department, and I monitored the Howell School District's special education program. So that's about my only contact, with the school itself. But I spent my whole career in working in schools and school-related kind of stuff. Well, they had what they call Hillcrest now. It used to be called the Sanitarium way back when. It's been closed for years, but yeah, it was originally a hospital for people that had tuberculosis. They put it up on the hill because they thought fresh air was a good treatment, so to speak, or condition for TB. And they eventually converted it into a hospital that served people with disabilities. Without being more specific, but anyway, it was spent several years now. It was called Hillcrest. It was run by Department of Health. It's been closed and torn down many years ago.
When you were growing up, was there a hospital even around here?
Well, it's my favorite story. Not my favorite, but one. I tell people I was born in the bank parking lot on North Michigan Avenue, where the hospital used to be. It was an old McPherson family mansion, and I think it was 3 stories. It was 3 stories, and that's where I was born. And it was there until, I guess, until they built the McPherson Hospital on Byron Road, and I think it was built in mid-50s, I'm guessing, or 58 or somewhere along in there.
Why were you born in the parking lot?
It's where the hospital was.
You just couldn't wait to get in?
No, that wasn't it at all, no. They tore down the hospital and put up a parking lot. And then, of course, a bank and the condos and so on that are there now. But, well, the fire station used to be right across the street on Clinton, across from about where Tommy Kaiser's office is, right across from that, in fact. And I remember they had the only white fire truck I've ever seen. They bought it brand new. I think it was a 55. And once in a while, I still see it in a parade around here. Not lately, but I have seen it in a parade. That's kind of scary. I worked for Department of Corrections for a couple of years. There was a lot of minority employees, colleagues, and that was actually kind of refreshing because, you know, you don't see much of that around here. Mm-hmm. I had the good fortune of having a neighbor, and one of the guys we used to do Sandlot Ball with, Robert Griffin, and he lived about 2 blocks from me, and one of the very few families of color, if you want to call it. It's so hard to know how to refer to them nowadays, but them and the Cunningham family, and Willie the window washer, and there weren't very many, and I still don't see many minorities. We had service at the Presbyterian Church across the street where I attend, and a few weeks ago, kind of a follow-up of all the hate kind of things that are going on, you know, to promote peace and acceptance, and not a single minority attended. And I guess that didn't surprise them any, but, you know, we wanted to show that they're welcome. I didn't think much of it. Robbie and I used to walk to school together and play ball and so on. He's just another one of the kids. It was kind of like the Little Rascals. So, well, thanks for giving me a chance to
Absolutely.
have some memories that I enjoy talking about.